That was fast, right?
That was good. Fast is good. Fast is nice. Tonight we're doing my favorite body part, which is your heart.
Hard.
Yes. Woo! Just in time for Valentine's Day. So before we do the heart, you're going to learn some vocabulary that's essential to understanding what we're talking about. The first bunch of words you have to learn are the chamber words. What is a chamber, medical people?
Space.
A space, a room, a cavity. So how many spaces in a human heart?
4.
There are 4 chambers. So you have 4 total chambers. There are 2 kinds. Atrium and ventricle. So an atrium and a ventricle. You have 2 of each. 2 atria, 2 ventricles. Now, someone tell me the difference between an atrium space and the ventricle space.
Top, bottom.
One's top and the bottom. Okay, so atrium's the top, ventricle's the bottom. That's not really the thing I was hoping for. Smaller, bigger. So atria are smaller. Ventricles are bigger. Again, not really the thing I'm hoping for.
One takes blood in, one takes blood.
Which one does in and which one does out?
Ventricle pumps out.
Yes. So the ventricle pumps blood out. It sends away. It discharges. Pick a word. Atria are in, receive, welcome. So if you're in buildings, the atria is what you walk into. So you have atria and ventricles, ins and outs. Right? Next word are the vessels. These are the tubing. Tubes that go from my heart somewhere. 2 choices. You have artery, and the other choice is vein. And you learned it incorrectly in your career so far. What is the definition of an artery tube? How do you know an artery when you see one?
It's red.
Red.
No, it's not. I was waiting for that. Stepped right on it. Takes blood away from where?
Heart.
Very good. A spells away. Arteries carry blood away from the heart to an organ. So they're going away from the heart to someplace. So tell me what a vein does. Back to the heart. Receives, returning from an organ. So arteries are away, veins are to. So you have ins and outs, aways and tos. Now, the last group of words. These are circuits. Circuits are locations or places, routes, destinations. Pick a thought you want. Your first choice for a circuit is the pulmonary circuit. Can someone tell me where my pulmonary circuit is?
Lungs.
That's lung land, as I call it. That's your lungs, dealing with my lungs. The other one is systemic. Can you tell me where your systemic is?
Everywhere.
Everywhere else. Body. Yes, I know your lungs and your body. That's not what I mean here. Right? It's just anything that's not a lung. So we're going to speak cardiologist. If I'm looking at my insurance bill and they're billing me for something with my pulmonary artery, they just sent me a bill about what? What does pulmonary artery mean in cardiology?
Blood going to the lungs.
The blood vessel going away from my heart to my $250 later, right? So that's how you speak cardiology. You just mix and match these words to say what you want to do. So if I'm looking at a systemic vein, what am I looking at?
Vein that goes.
A tube carrying blood back to my heart from my somewhere in my body, right? That'd be another $250. Right? So if you know those words, you can walk your way through a heart, which is what our next skill is going to be. So let's look at a heart up close and personal. And we'll make a big long list because you're supposed to know the route through a heart, thou shalt. Okay, let's get our bearings here. Here are my chambers, my rooms, my spaces. Pick the word you like. All right, right atrium. Isn't that on the left? How can that be the right?
It's
It's a patient.
Yeah, always remember it's the patient, and the heart especially, always remember it's the patient's perspective. Because otherwise you will really do lousy in lab, right? So make sure you get that, the patient's perspective. So prove to me that's an atrium.
It's on top.
It's on top, it's smaller. Good, give me a more scientific sounding
Blood's
reason.
flowing in.
Blood's going in because the atria receive, they welcome. So this is a right side in, this is the right side out. This is the left side in, this is the left side out. So I have two sets of ins, two sets of outs on separate sides of the heart. Make sense? Two ins, two outs. All right, we're going to look at that tube up there. I'm going to get my mouse on it. Right. That tube there, my mouse? Is that an artery or a vein?
Vein.
Artery.
Artery. That's what I meant. Artery. Artery.
What makes the artery and a vein different? One goes away, there's two. So this, all the arrows, right? I'm in my heart, I'm going away from my heart. That must be an artery, but it's blue, who cares? Right? It doesn't matter the color, which was what you were mistaught. You can have red or blue, anything. The difference is direction. So that is an artery, even though it's blue. That's going to go to my lungs. So what artery is that? Pulmonary artery, because it's going away from my heart toward my lungs as part of the pulmonary circuit. There's my lungs. Right? This tube over here, that's going back to my heart from my lungs. So it's going to be the pulmonary vein, because that's what that means. It's going to go in, receive in my atrium, out my ventricle, out this tube. That tube's going to take me to the systemic circuit. So this tube where my mouse is that an artery or a vein?
Artery.
It's an artery. It's going away from my heart to my body. And this one over on this side is, that's a vein, because it's going back to my heart from my body. Right? So we're going to redo that one more time. This time we're going to write every structure you see, because thou shalt know the pathway through the heart, thou shalt. So on your quiz next week, you will be a drop of blood beginning somewhere of my choice. You got to name everything you'd pass through on your route. Let's practice that skill. I'm going to start you, because I have power, because I'm the teacher, in the right atrium. I can start you anywhere I want next week. I'm going to start you in the right atrium. What's the next thing you're in?
Right ventricle.
The right ventricle. I go into and out. Where am I going to be now? Pulmonary
Artery.
artery, because I'm going to be going away from the heart to my lung, right? So since you can't see, I'll make it a little bit smaller. Right? So my pulmonary artery would take me to my what?
Lungs.
To my lungs. Great, now I got to get back to my heart for the next pass. So how am I going to get back to my heart from my lungs?
Pulmonary vein.
Pulmonary vein. Pulmonary veins would go into what room?
Left atrium.
The left atrium. That's getting the breakdown. What comes after the left atrium? Left ventricle. What comes after the left ventricle? Systemic artery would sound right, but it's wrong, because they used an old Roman word called the aorta. It's still an A, it's still an artery, but you have to say aorta. I would understand what you meant with some other word, but it won't count. Where's the aorta send the blood?
Body.
To my body, systemic, body, everywhere. Pick a word. Now I got to get back to my heart to do this again. So how am I going to get from my body to my heart? Vena cava, vena cava, lots of words. That's a vein, vena, vena. That's the systemic vein going back to the right atrium. So I just made a loop-de-loop. Thou shalt know this, thou shalt. Right? Make sense? So we're going to, question?
For the quiz, you don't care if it's inferior or
No,
superior.
no.
Okay.
Then we'll look what we got. Let's do some hints. Which side of the heart, right or left, is your pulmonary side?
Right.
The right side of the heart. So when I was a lad learning this, the right side of the heart is your pulmonary side. Therefore, the left side of your heart must be what?
Systemic.
The systemic side. So you're going to quote right side lung, left side body. Right side lung, left side body for the next week. All All right? That's to help you figure out which one, the right side goes to the lungs, left side goes to the body. Okay, I want you to look at the letters A and V for me. What do you notice about the A's and V's as you go along? What was it? I heard it.
They match up.
They match up and they also alternate. You notice atrium, ventricle, artery, vein. A, V, A, V every time. So when you're writing this in order, if you get 3 V's in a row, you're wrong. Because there should be an A followed by a V every time. In, out, away, two. In, out, away, two. Right. So A's and V's should alternate or flip around. Let's do the color stuff. What's this red and blue represent on this picture?
Oxygenated.
Very good. Oxygenated and deoxygenated. So let's figure out what side of the heart is the oxygenated side. Which side's oxygenated?
Right.
Why does the left one have oxygen in it?
Coming back from the lungs.
Very good. So if you think about what your lungs are for, lungs oxygenate my blood. So the blood goes to my lungs, becomes red, or oxygenated, goes to my heart then sends it to my body. What does my body do with oxygen?
Uses it.
Uses it up. So my blood becomes deoxygenated, oxygen poor, blue, if you like that word. And I'm going to send the blue blood to my heart to send it back to my lungs. So the right side of your heart is the blue side, deoxygenated side, old blood side. And the left side is the red, oxygenated, good blood side. Because the right one sends it to the lungs to be recharged with oxygen. The left sends it to the body that uses the oxygen. Right? So half of your heart's red, half of your heart's blue. Half the arteries are red, half the arteries are blue. Right, in this picture. So for your heart, everything's paired up. There's 2 of everything. Right? Some are red, some are blue. But there's still 2 arteries, 2 veins, 2 atria, 2 ventricles. The difference is what side you're on matters. Make sense? So in addition to learning the pathway, you have to know if it's red or blue in each structure you're naming. All right? Make sense? Okay, we have more to add. We're not done yet. Ooh, what did I just do there? I don't know what that is. Here's the picture for next week's lab. So this will be what you're memorizing in lab. Okay, so we're going to figure out some parts that are not on here. And those parts, these white things here and there. What are those white things there and there? Valves! Good, let's write valves over here. Another list.
And that's another word we need to define.
Yes, there's another bunch of words we're going to add to that eventually. Can someone tell me why your heart has valves? Very good. To stop backflow. If you look at the list you just did, for you to stay alive, the blood has to go from your lungs to your body. If the blood went backwards, you're dead, right? So it's got to keep the right way. So the valve's job is to stop backflow. If you know a plumber, they're going to call these a check valve. It keeps the water going only one way. So your heart has 4 sets of check valves in it to keep the blood the right way. They're in 2 groups. First group of the valves are called your atrioventricular valves. Can anyone guess from the name where they would be found?
Atrium.
Between the atrium and the
Ventricle.
ventricles. Very good. So these are named between the atria and the ventricles. Atrioventricular, also called your AVs. There are 2 of them. One on the right and one on the left, which makes sense. So you're going to have your tricuspid, and the other one is your bicuspid. Medical terminology, people. What does tricuspid literally mean? You're good. 3. Don't you think you hear that class? Be nervous, right? Cuspid flaps, right? 3 flaps, 3 bumps, 2 bumps. So where are they? Let's look at our heart here. Can someone find the tricuspid valve for me? Look right here. What side is it on?
Right.
It's the right side. Very good. So the tricuspid valve is between the right atrium And the right ventricle is between the RA and the RV. So on our big long list here, tricuspid, right there. Between the right atrium and the right ventricle. Can you guess where the bicuspid's going to be? Between the left atrium and the left ventricle. It's on the left side. If you look over here, bicuspid. Boom. I'm going to put that right here. The bicuspid's between the LA and the LV. Just so you don't freak out, the bicuspid is also called the mitral. So if you hear people talk about mitral valve, they mean the same as a bicuspid valve. Because doctors can't agree. A miner's a bishop's hat that's in two parts. They got the name from that. Those are your tri-bicuspids. The way you're going to remember this, you try before you buy. So your tri comes first in this pathway, your bi comes second on the pathway. Next group number 2. These are called your semilunars. Semilunar valves, which you know mean what? Half
moon.
Half moons, to some drunk Roman. There are 2 of them, one on each side. And these are between the ventricle and the artery. So these are between a ventricle and an artery. So if you look carefully, right here, here are their names. You have a pulmonary and an aortic valve. So put them right over here. Pulmonary valve. And you have the aortic valve. Can you guess what side the pulmonary one would be on? The right side. Because pulmonary is on your right, the aortic would be on your left. So if I go up here, right here would be my pulmonary valve, because it's between my ventricle and my pulmonary artery on the right side. Here, this is going to be my aortic valve, because between my left ventricle and the aorta. So you have 4 valves, 2 on each side. Make sense? Okay, so if you put those together, you try before you buy. And if you look at the letters T, P, B, A, you toilet paper Bob's ass. We do them in order. Or Becky's ass. I don't care whose ass it is. T, P, B, A. Be the 4 valves in order to the pathway. So you need to know the valves in addition to the chambers and the vessels. Make sense? Okay, so let's figure out why these valves matter. I'm going to show you a picture of some valves. Okay, so here are my tri and bicuspid valves between my atria and ventricles on each side. They're open. What does that mean if the valves are open? What can happen if they're open? Blood can flow through. I've opened the door. Y'all come in, right? That's what this is. Okay, so take a look at this picture. What do the valves do? So why are they closing? So blood can't go back, right? So this forces the blood to go a different route. So I can't go back where I came from. So when I close these valves, close these doors, the blood has to take a different turn. So it has to go up this way. So here, these 2 valves are open. And then look what they did here. What do those valves do over here? They close. So for your heart to work, the valves have to alternate open and close. Let the blood in and let the blood out. I have to open and shut the valves in order so the blood goes the correct way. So both sides are going to use their valves to regulate the blood flow. Make sense? Okay. So we're going to see an animation now of that process, using these valves to make my heart keep the blood going the right way.
The heart is the pump of the human circulatory system. The left side of the heart has 2 connected chambers, the left atrium and the left ventricle. The right side of the heart also has 2 connected chambers, the right atrium and the right ventricle. These 2 sides, or pumps of the heart, are not directly connected with one another.
That's a creepy concept, but just because you have one heart doesn't mean they work together. They actually are two separate things glued together, right? So the right side is pumping to your lungs, the left side is pumping to your body, and they don't actually like each other. They just happen to be living like your siblings. They happen to be living together, right? So even though they share the same words and everything, they're not actually talking to each other. They're sending blood to different parts of the body. So you have a lung pump and a body pump in the same spot, right? So each one is mirroring the other one. They have the same parts, just different locations for the blood.
Oxygenated blood from the lungs travels through large vessels called the pulmonary veins and enters the left side of the heart, emptying directly into the left atrium. The pulmonary veins are unusual in that they carry oxygenated blood. Other veins, because they carry blood back to the heart from the body tissues, carry deoxygenated blood.
Because remember, it doesn't matter what's in the blood, what matters is the direction it's flowing. So you can have red or blue anything. Most of your arteries are red, most of your veins are blue, but there's always these weird exceptions. But here I have my pulmonary veins coming back from my lungs. They're going to take it back into the left atrium of my heart.
From the left atrium, blood flows through a one-way valve called the left atrioventricular valve, also known as the bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle. Most of this flow, roughly 70%, occurs while the heart is relaxed. The atrium then contracts, filling the remaining 30% of the ventricle with its blood.
So notice my valve is open, blood can go through.
After a slight delay, the ventricle contracts. The contraction forces the blood to exit into an opening that leads to the largest artery in the body, the aorta. The atrioventricular valve closes and prevents the backflow of blood into the atrium.
So there's that concept of the valve. So if that didn't happen, the ventricle just send the blood right back where it came from. So if I don't want it to return, I shut the door, that way it can't go back. It forces the blood to go a different route. Your mom taught you, right, when you leave the room and shut the door? Your heart does that. When the blood leaves a space, you shut the door behind it so it can't come back. Okay? So I'm going to shut the door to force the blood out a different direction.
The aorta is closed off from the left ventricle by a one-way valve, the aortic semilunar valve. It is oriented to permit the flow of the blood out of the ventricle, but it snaps shut in response to backflow.
By the way, you don't have to include the semilunar part, that's its formal name. If you said aortic valve, I know what you mean. You can say aortic semilunar, that's fine too.
Many arteries branch from the aorta, carrying oxygen-rich blood to all parts of the body. The pathway of blood vessels to the body regions and organs other than the lungs is called the systemic circulation. The systemic circulation brings blood to the neck and head and to organs in the rest of the body. The systemic circulation gives up oxygen to the body tissues and receives carbon dioxide. The blood that flows into the arterial system eventually returns to the heart after flowing through the capillaries. As it returns, blood passes through a series of veins, eventually entering the right side of the heart. Two large veins collect blood from the systemic circulation. The superior vena cava drains the upper body, and the inferior vena cava drains the lower body. These veins dump deoxygenated blood into the right atrium.
Okay, so before you freak out, in real life you have two vena cavae, and they drain in the same spot. They both drain in the right atrium. But in my middle list there, I just put them together as one thing. They're still draining from the body, they're still going in the right atrium. But in lab, you have to know there's actually two tubes, but they meet to go in the heart. So for our flow chart, as long as you said vena cava, I'm okay. You don't have to specify which one. So I'm not lying to you. Well, I kind of am, but not much.
Blood passes from the right atrium into the right ventricle through a one-way valve, the right atrioventricular valve, also known as the tricuspid valve. Blood passes out of the contracting right ventricle through a second valve, the pulmonary semilunar valve, into a single pulmonary artery, sometimes called the pulmonary trunk, which subsequently branches into arteries that carry deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The blood then returns from the lungs to the left side of the heart, replenished with oxygen and cleared of much of its load of carbon dioxide.
Let's go from blue to red.
The pumping of the heart is a repeated cardiac cycle of relaxation and contraction of the atria and ventricles.
Okay, so with all your eyes, you have to watch the arrows, the valves, the heart, and read the text again. All right? So we'll go through this one by one. So look at the valves first. What do you notice about the valving? Opening and closing, and each side opens and closes valves, and they alternate, right? So let me go back. I have to go back to this one here.
The pumping of the heart is a repeated cardiac cycle of relaxation and contraction of the atria and ventricles.
So you notice when this one opens, that one closes. When that one opens, this one closes. So they alternate to force the blood to the right way. When you say about the sides of the heart, are they both going together, or are they going one at a time?
Together.
They're both together. So even though we list it as though you start on the right and go to the left, in real life, both sides are pumping at the same time. There's pumping to two different places. So your right heart and your left heart are beating at the same time. Right? So even though we draw it one way, you have to comprehend that both sides are going at the same time to opposite places. Right? So you have the valves that alternate back and forth, and both sides are pumping at the same time, but to a different end result. That's the magic of the heart. So everything you guys think of, you got to think of that, where they're alternating and pumping together. Make sense? Because now we're going to go through actually how you get the heart to do that. How do I get the heart to beat and send blood where it goes? So I'm going to show you a static picture first, and then I'm going to show you uglier pictures later. So here's a heart. So we're going to do a big long list of 8 steps that thou shalt know in a minute regarding these pictures. This is going to be the cardiac cycle that we're going to